And we are back ahead of game week 32. Of course, it's our Attacking Assets podcast. If you haven't seen the defensive roundup that we've done on Thursday, why not? You're missing a rip snorter and a fantastic impression of Matthew McConaughey from your good self. And Jason did chip in there with a little bit as well. So, yeah. Anyway, my esteemed co-host, Mr. McKenna, we're back looking swish as ever, my friend. How are you?
Well, I would say not swish enough yet because, as we discussed in yesterday's podcast, you've come in with a fantastic hairdo, whereas I've still not had mine yet. I did tease people. I said possibly might have a new haircut by today, but I'll definitely have one next week. So that is another reason to subscribe to the channel, like, share the video, and get involved with the Premier Injuries community so that you can see how good or how bad the hairdresser does my hair. And yeah, I mean, just quickly, on yesterday's show as well, we did do the Matthew McConaughey impressions. I do have to ask, do you think that my McConaughey impression is better than my Geordie one?
I mean, the Geordie one takes some beating. The Geordie one's up there. It's number one. That'll take some knocking off its perch.
I think we should do like a series on just impressions that we can do, throw in a Northern Irish one week, Brendan Rodgers, great character, just throwing in stuff like that.
Yeah, interesting.
Premier impressions instead of Premier Injuries. No, but we are talking about forwards today, so let's continue the conversation before we get sidetracked and maybe insult some people with terrible impressions, although yours was fantastic. And just to repeat what we said yesterday and repeat some of the stuff that are in previous videos, we'll put it in the description below about teams that have got nothing to play for and teams in the game week 30 to 38 range where they score more and concede more. And we're seeing that teams are scoring more in this game week range. It's obviously 2 game weeks, so game week 1 to 29, 1.3 goals conceded per game. And since game week 30, we've seen 3.88. And the reason we kind of said, obviously, it's only 2 game weeks worth of data, but the flip side is it's quite a few games of varying difficulties. We've seen teams at the top, teams at the bottom, fight it out. It's been a good mixture to kind of give an indication that it might continue towards the end of the season. We've discussed this, that there's fatigue, there's COVID, there's a lot at play here. And I think the psychology of a lot of players is very fatigued, more than usual. And so we think that probably this high goal scoring will continue. So repeating this message a little bit, but maybe a good examination, moving it from yesterday's discussion, Ben, who do you think are the teams that have nothing to play for? And so jump on those fixtures because they score more but also concede more. So you might want to look for like a Chelsea or a Liverpool that have a lot to play for and they're playing a team that's got nothing to play for. One of them was Crystal Palace. Do you think there are any others?
Well, Palace was the big one in terms of, I think they're treading water now. And anybody lining up against that Palace team, you're potentially identifying maybe some captaincy options in there. West Ham, they've got that bit of momentum. They've got that confidence. They've got Champions League aspirations. They are, they've got Chelsea on their coattails. They've got Leicester in their sights. Though, they would have been a standout. Will injuries come back to bite them? They've obviously got our boys, this weekend. That's going to be a tough game. That's going to be a true barometer of how David Moyes' men are going to be able to cope, during this period. They're conceding too many goals. That's the concern. It's all well and good. Like I say, you're going out and, scoring 2 and 3, but you can't do that every game. We experienced it way back in the day with Kevin Keegan. It's entertaining, it's great to watch, but you can't expect your side to go out and score 2s, 3s and 4s every week. So that's a slight concern, but that's great for us in terms of the data and looking at maybe teams who score. So for us and me, Callum Wilson is a player who maybe should be on people's radar. We know that historically, or certainly this season anyway, Newcastle don't win without Wilson, and they haven't done so at all. And of course, we were 1-0 down at Turf Moor last weekend, and his introduction, along with Alan Saint-Maxim, helped turn around that game. So that was a huge boost for us, and probably just puts us safe. Tottenham, for me as well, are a team to maybe, they're in that, the Aaron's uncertainty with regards to Tottenham. If anybody you're going to, it might be Harry Kane. If you're a Son owner, you could maybe look to keep him, but would I be bringing him in? I'm just not so sure. There's too many question marks around that. Everton were a team as well to potentially avoid. We know that Calvert-Lewin is out of this game week, so he's going to be out of game week 32 with a groin problem. They struggled terribly at the Amex against Brighton and were lucky to come away with a point. For me, I still expect big things from Liverpool. They've got what looks to be a decent run on fixtures. They can now focus solely on the Premier League after, they lost on aggregate to Real Madrid in the Champions League. So those are teams that I'm going to be focusing on. They still will believe that they can get that Champions League qualification spot. So again, they've still got that motivation to be able to push on. And Klopp can get some good work with them on the training pitches, I think, which is imperative as well, because for a lot of these teams who've had these congested fixture periods, it's just been a case of post-match recovery and then get ready, in the build-up to the next game with very little or nothing happening in terms of fitness or tactics, for those players. So just a bit of a change and freshen up, and that'll do them good as we head into those sort of final, maybe 6 or 7 game weeks.
Yeah, and adding to your discussion point there, so you've kind of highlighted teams that have a lot to play for, but I'm looking at the teams as well, maybe for captaincy picks or bringing in to my team who are playing against these teams. So I think Leeds are a little bit different. I think Bielsa pushes those teams, but maybe from 10th downwards, a lot of those teams, you have to question what is their motivation. Aston Villa, earlier on in the season, you'd say, they might try and get Europa League, but that seems a little bit distant now with the fact that Grealish is in and out of the side. I think they've lost that ability to kind of see games out, capitalise on opposition. So I think they'll just be happy that they've stayed up this season in a fairly good position. They might consolidate it with a 10th or a 9th, but realistically, they're not going to push for Europa League. Wolves, Crystal Palace, and I'd say Southampton as well are safe enough, and I think Southampton have recently shown that they feel that they're safe enough from the fact that they're letting in so many goals, so many chances. So I'd say that group there, from 10th to 14th, we'll see a lot of goals conceded, but we'll also see maybe some goals scored by them. But those are the ones that you kind of want to capitalise upon. Maybe Wolves might be a little bit different because Nuno Espirito Santo does like to concentrate on defence, but this season the team has looked at odds at times. They've had so many injury problems. Johnny once again out for a very long time, another ACL injury. So there is quite a few problems there. Focusing attention maybe on the Brighton, Burnley, Newcastle lot. Newcastle are going to be fighting to stay in the Premier League, so I think they do have a little bit to play for. Burnley are Burnley, but I think as well they're going to focus, because we discussed with the points mark, it's not 40 points, it's actually about 39 or 38 that is the safe mark. So it's a little bit lower than people realise as well. They're not quite there, a few of those teams, so they'll want to get that. And unfortunately, I think Fulham, West Brom and Sheffield United, they're going to be ones to capitalise upon. So I think this list will grow as more teams get safe, and also obviously as teams further up the table as well consolidate positions. They're far enough ahead and they'll be absolutely fine. I think the most interesting one is going to be watching, maybe from 9th to 1st and seeing who is going to be playing for what European positions. And I don't think Arsenal will get a European position this season. I think Everton will struggle, and from maybe Tottenham upwards, that's probably going to be the European positions there. It's just going to be who and where and which way they all end up. So it's quite an exciting end to the season. There's a lot to play for, apart from if you're Man City, you're sitting pretty at the top. But maybe continuing on a team there that does have Champions League, that does have a lot to play for. People are looking to Chelsea now, and they seem to have... I'm not sure if I totally buy into that. They do have 6 goals in their last 2 games. They do have an XG of 5.23. But looking at it, which asset can you get in? I think apart from Mount, I would feel worried to have any of those people in. Pulisic had a fantastic game against Crystal Palace. Havertz did as well. But this is the Tuchel effect. Werner might be in the team next week. Giroud, Tammy Abraham, all these players that are fantastic at Chelsea. Their problem is they've got too many good players. You don't know who's going to start. And Tuchel as well will have one eye on the Champions League as well. So I think the message still is, and I think a lot of people get angry at this, but Mount and Mendy are probably the only ones that I would have and do have in my side. But would you say that there's a little bit more trust from you in those Chelsea assets, or are you still as reluctant to bring them in?
Yeah, I'm reluctant as well, Jay. I've seen the game against Palace. Let's not read too much into that game. I thought Havertz was superb, and Pulisic actually. But that it wouldn't surprise you if Chelsea still have Champions League involvement as well. So there will be a lot of squad management in and around these upcoming game weeks. Tuchel showed that he is able to make 4, 5, 6 changes as Pep Guardiola does, and for the most part, Chelsea have been able to go out and get a decent result. I really do like Mount. I think he's sort of, he broke onto the scene last season, had some great performances. Seems as if he's coming of age, and he's almost becoming an integral part of that Chelsea, attacking midfield now. So maybe he's one of the players that I would suggest that, is one of those names that will never be away from too far away from that starting 11. And yeah, agree maybe with Mendy. Yeah, but in defence, that's difficult to predict. And further up the pitch, the issues that you've got, he's got so many attacking options at his disposal. Just who at this stage of the season, you need to have a strong bench, and whoever you pick, you're looking for them to make, to start. And at the price point that Chelsea players tend to come in at, you can't really afford to be gambling on those players, not starting and taking the bench. So, a 1 point return for somebody, it's not considered high-end premium, but, will cost you a decent chunk of change compared to, some others which are more readily available and more, easy to pick up. Then, yeah, look, it makes it they're a hard player to convince you to sort of pull the trigger on.
I think the other thing as well is it's not the best run-in for Chelsea, because they do play a lot of those teams that they're vying with for the European positions. They play Brighton next, which, can be a difficult one. It depends which Brighton team turns up. Then they play West Ham, who, as we said there, have been conceding a lot, but they'll want to see that one through. The Hammers and Chelsea as well. It's going to be a difficult matchup. They've got Man City, they've got Leicester towards the end of the season, in between with Fulham, Arsenal and Aston Villa. It's not the greatest of run-in. As I said, their 4th worst run-in towards the end. So I'm not sure if it's a good idea to fully go in on Chelsea. We've kind of seen as well There's been, even with their almost infallible defence, they've conceded a lot of goals. So the gloss is a little bit off of the Blues at the moment. I'm still happy to own Mendy. I'm still happy to own Mount for the time being, with some good fixtures in there. But you just have to realise that, as you said there, Ben, you have to back the bench up. Now, moving on to another one, just repeating what we've discussed maybe last week, Jarrod Bowen. I think his performance this week solidifies what I think is a great own. I think he's very much, a differential in the community. And one of the most interesting things that I found out about him this week is his shot on target conversion rate, 61%. And of forwards in the Premier League, only Callum Wilson has been higher this season. And couple that with the West Ham fixtures. So as we talked about Chelsea, they're having difficult ones. West Ham have one of the nicest runs towards the end of the season. Aforementioned the difficult game with Chelsea. They have the Everton game. That comes up as red on the difficulty fixture analysis. But I don't see that one as red as much as a lot of people are worried about. But the rest is a sea of green. Those teams that have nothing to play for / are in the relegation battle. That is a really good run-in for West Ham. And, I mean, maybe it relies on Antonio if he's out for very long. But, yeah, can you clear up the situation there? Do you expect Bowen to be starting week in, week out towards the end of the season?
I would be highly, very, very surprised if Antonio was anywhere near the matchday squad in game week 32 against Newcastle. David Moyes, keeping his cards very close to his chest, isn't giving anything away. Even ahead of last weekend, he says, I don't think Mikel Antonio will make the game. He was never even close. The issues that he's had are well documented. So even a slight issue, a slight problem with Mikel, could be a 2 to 4 week period. Looking where we are at this stage of the season, that would mean he could be out until May, with maybe 2 games remaining. And then that return would depend on what West Ham are going for. If they're still pushing for a Champions League spot, then yeah, maybe take the risk and reintroduce him to a squad. But if it's season over and West Ham capitulate between now and then there's absolutely no need, to risk him. So Jarrod Bowen's come in, he's done a good job. West Ham are performing in the absence of Mikel Antonio. So that removes that headache for David Moyes. The pressure's off. There's no need to rush Antonio back at this moment. There's no need to panic. So yeah, for now, it looks like Jarrod Bowen is going to be deployed in that. Well, we're not really sure whether he'll be as put in as a centre forward. I think you're seeing Fornals playing the central role with Bowen and Lingard either side. But look, we know that the likelihood is he's going to be starting first and foremost, and in the form that he's been in and the form that West Ham have been in, they're creating chances, and he shouldn't be too far away from getting some kind of fantasy return.
Now, you've mentioned them already, your boys Newcastle, but I do want to throw in there another team at the bottom of the league, West Brom. Both teams have looked bright since the international break. It's been quite interesting and maybe a little bit refreshing as well from their kind of earlier season performances. Since game week 30, so over the last 2 game weeks, Newcastle sit top for expected goals, 5.28. I'm incredulous as you are, Ben. They sit ahead of Chelsea, Liverpool, but in 4th place is West Brom with 4.6 expected goals. They've massively overperformed with 8 goals scored. But then throughout the early part of the season, we were talking week in, week out. Diagne, Pereira were putting in fairly good numbers but weren't matching them. So is this maybe a time where form kind of goes ahead of fixtures, ahead of where the teams are in the league, and you kind of dip the toe and think, you know what, I'll have a Newcastle or West Brom midfielder, the likes of Pereira. So I would focus attention on Pereira because he has the highest XGI of those players. But an Alan Saint-Maxim, he's quite a fairly cheap asset, somebody that you can bench quite easily, but he's sniffing around the goals. And as you said there, maybe Callum Wilson if and when he is back. Do you think, though, that it's a false dawn? 2 game weeks worth of data, maybe a little bit buying into it too much? Or is it just the effect that we've kind of noticed that these teams do have quite a bit to play for? They're trying to. And West Brom and maybe Newcastle a little bit are going the Keegan method of, right, you score 3 against us because we got a terrible defence. We'll try and score 4.
Look, we're getting at the stage of the season now where certainly in West Brom's case, a point is neither here nor there. It's they've got to go out and get that 3 points. They've got to get the victory. So they're throwing caution to the wind. Sam Allardyce, his Italian brother, he's pulled off a blinder. And look, if you're looking to maybe make up some late ground, mini leagues, overall ranks, if you just want to change things up, then these are the teams that you want to be looking at. Move away from that template that you've stuck with all season, and look to try and pick up some of these players, and reap the rewards, because they all have their own. Teams have their own philosophies. Players have their own end goals in sight. San Max is making up for lost time following his injury. He's coming off the back of long COVID as well. So he's fresh. He should be finishing the season in a, really, really strong and well. He'll not be suffering from the fatigue that all of these other players, because he just hasn't got that load in his legs. And when you consider San Maxim, given, the explosive nature of his game, then it could be, he's a player that maybe will benefit during this period. And if Steve Bruce is prepared to, loosen those shackles and let Newcastle attack a little bit more with Callum Wilson, then, he could be, one of the huge benefactors of that. With West Brom, again, like I say, I think Pereira is the standout. Callum Robinson looks a huge differential. I think he's got 3 in his last 2. I'm not sure what his ownership is, but I'd be surprised if it was above maybe 2 or 3%. And they're in the team on merit, and as long as West Brom keep on performing and getting those results, you can't see those players, sort of moving in. And until it's mathematically impossible, then I don't see, Sam Allardyce has said he's going with his strongest 11 week in and week out. So you're not going to get much change in that starting 11. And, based on last weekend's result, he'll be, going in there with his same starting 11 again. So you can be pretty, assured that if you get one of those players who are, they're going to start, and the likelihood is, they're going to be going for it for the full 90 minutes and not easing off. Like maybe some of the other possible sides, or who are maybe a little bit safer. Or
just adding to that conversation there, Ben, Newcastle played Tottenham and Burnley. West Brom played Chelsea and Southampton. So I don't know, that they do seem a little bit freakish results there, but they do have a lot to play for as well. And I think they're good differentials. And obviously I said there with Wilson, when he comes back, I know that he played against Burnley 33 minutes, but kind of looking towards that end of season period, do you expect him to maybe get more minutes now? Are Newcastle going to risk him with a few more minutes each week, or do you think maybe he might even start next week's game?
I mean, he's our talisman, first and foremost. So, if Callum Wilson is anywhere near full fitness, he starts. End of story. That's not even up for discussion. I was quite pleased with how Steve Bruce managed his squad ahead of the Burnley game. I truly expected him to start with Alan Saint-Maximin following his cameo against Tottenham. Well, again, he swung the game around into Newcastle's favour, played a big part in that equalising goal. So I thought on the back of that, he would have started him at Turf Moor. Made a big call and didn't, given the fact that he's coming off the back of a muscle injury. Introduced him at the right time, and we've seen, maybe again against a Burnley defence was just a little bit tired. I think it was in and around maybe the 57th or the hour mark. Certainly, and he capitalised on that. So he was a week ahead of Callum Wilson. So it could be that maybe Wilson is held back another week. But to consider, we had Joe Linton and Dwight Gill start down at Turf Moor. They weren't great. they were bullied out of it. Very physical side. The Tarkowski, me, Loughton, Eric Peters, they all like a battle. They don't shake from it, unlike maybe Tottenham, who give them a little bit of an easy ride. Davidson, Sanchez, and what have you. They're not going to really sort of mix it with you. And Joe Linton, they didn't respond to that. So it's whether Steve Bruce feels, Callum Wilson is ready to go out there and, if not playing 90 minutes, is he fit enough to start? Yeah. Can we get 60 or 70 minutes out of him? That's the question. And if he feels it may be too much of a risk, then I could see maybe another 30 to 35 minutes off the bench with a view to starting in game week 33.
So moving the attention to Tottenham now, and we did discuss this yesterday with Region. We're going to put our attentions now to the forward line because they do have the double game week. I think Kane, we don't even need to discuss it. Everybody has him or should have him in their team. But the question is, do you want anybody else? Heung-min Son has not been himself recently, and I would say the most of the Tottenham team haven't been themselves. There's talk of, bad falling out within the Mourinho camp at Tottenham. There's problems, and we know that this happens with Jose. It's the kind of 2 to 3 season effect. He doesn't stay at clubs much longer than that. And maybe it's happening even earlier because he's not had the success that was expected. They're expected to push for maybe 1 or 2 trophies at least this season. The classic Jose effect, but it's not happening and there's real pressures there. This seems to have affected Son a little bit. He did get a goal last weekend, but his data hasn't been great for a little while as well. It's not, that he's been producing good opportunities and not putting them away, which, Son has historically really overperformed, and he can continue that overperformance as well. He is an elite performer at that. He's up there as one of the best around the world at continuing, especially with XG, to overperform. But even he has been really, really quiet, and quite shockingly so. So with the fact that there's no real form behind him, but there's really, really good fixtures here, would you rip up your team a little bit to bring Son in, or would you be happy to just stick without him? Because at the end of the day, it's going to be a hard one towards the end of the season to justify having him in, isn't it?
Yeah, if you've got Son, keep him. I think there's a justification in that. But if you're looking to bring a player in, then Son wouldn't be number one on that list. I'm happy, more than happy with just sitting with Harry Kane at Tottenham, and that's it. I'm not really convinced again that uncertainty that in and around the manager and the confidence of the team is just a little bit too off-putting for me.
And let's move it then to the final kind of discussion point of this week before we round up. And Iheanacho, he seems to be the word on everybody's lips at the moment. And, quite frankly, I liked him at the City days. It's quite interesting. Maybe he should have had more of an opportunity there. I don't know. Compare him to maybe Gabriel Jesus. But he's finally hitting the form that a lot of people expected of him. And amongst the forwards this season, he's top 5 for conversion of big chances to goals. Olivier Giroud is top there with 66%, but so is Iheanacho at 66%. Then Bruno Fernandes with 64%, Jesse Lingard at 61%. And actually one of your favourites, big chance to goals conversion ratio, 60%. It's Yuri Tillmans. Quite interesting though. I think you'll be quite proud of that because you've called him out. Looking at Iheanacho this season, 26.67% of his conversion of shots to goals. His overall average is about 16.53%. And 75% conversion of shots inside the box to goals, 50.8%. Now, those numbers seem quite high, and I wanted to compare them to what I would class as an absolutely world-class striker in Harry Kane. Probably the best striker in the Premier League, one of the best in the world, frankly. And you look at it, so As we said there, Iheanacho this season, 26.67% conversion rate of shots to goals. Harry Kane, 17.76% conversion of shots to goals. And his career average, talking of him being elite, is 22.21%. Iheanacho seems a little bit high at 26.27%. Switch it up to conversion of shots inside the box. This season, Iheanacho, as said, 75%. Harry Kane, 46.68%. And Harry Kane, on average, has 60.94% over his career. So the numbers don't look sustainable, but the question that you have to bring in is form over fixtures. You look at somebody who maybe Michu, somebody at Swansea where everything that he touched for that season turned to gold. And this is what FPL is about, isn't it? It's kind of finding those diamonds in the rough, those individuals maybe being in the Dallas Buyers Club at the right time when they hit the form. It is quite down to luck, and maybe Iheanacho is in the form of his life, and it is luck. But this is what we're about, capitalising on those opportunities. So for me, I think at his price point as well, I think that's the big sealer for me, is he's so cheap that if he suddenly falls out of form, you can bring in somebody else. You could bring in Bamford really easily to your team. You could bring in somebody else that is a fairly cheap striker around that price point, and you can facilitate the move with absolute ease. And also the other thing is as well, with the Bamford situation, towards the end of the season, Leicester's run kind of runs out just when Leeds' run begins. So again, you can change over if Iheanacho has run dry, and Bamford is always a pretty good asset that we've seen this season. So, I mean, looking at that, Ben, looking at maybe the data factored in with the form, what do you think about him in your side?
I was ahead of game week 31. I was more concerned the fact that James Maddison was approaching fitness, and I think once he gets up to speed, I think Brendan Rodgers puts him straight back in, and then there's questions with regards to how Brendan Rodgers will set up his team. Whether Jamie Vardy is then deployed as a lone striker, and Brendan Rodgers sort of shuffles in behind that. Now, obviously, we had the protocol breach with Hamza Chowdhury, Ayoze Perez, and James Maddison. For me, that ends James Maddison's hopes of going to the Euros. I firmly believe, I think there's enough competition in that area now for Gareth Southgate to maybe use that as not even as necessary as an excuse, but I think there's big question marks now, and I think that all works in Kelechi's favour. I know Brendan Rodgers said that all three players would be involved in the FA Cup this weekend. To what extent, we don't know. The conundrum he's got is Chelsea. They're in, as it stands, in their Champions League qualification places, and you need to consider those major stakeholders and the conversations that will be having behind closed doors, to the point where it's almost, I don't care what James Maddison's done. He's our best player. He's our best hope of maybe taking us, or keeping us in those Champions League spots. But I think as a manager, and even just in terms of managing the squad and the personnel, he has to be saying that there's nobody bigger than that team. There's no one individual who can just sort of disregard everything. And I think his game time from now until the end of the season will be limited, and Iheanacho will benefit from that. And like I say, that price point for a team that still have something to play for, then he's got to be worth a punt. Like I say, it's a bit of a no-brainer. Leicester still involved in the FA Cup, so it may mean some rotation here and there or restricted minutes. But look, he's got to be worth a punt, hasn't he, for that price? Surely, with Vardy off the boil somewhat, Iheanacho seems to be the guy that's stepped up. And he's repaying some of that faith shown by Rodgers.
So that is the kind of summariser there. And I don't think we need to talk about captaincy picks at all this week because it should be Harry Kane. He's got a double game week. It's easy as that. So that is the end of the show there. I'd just like to remind people, do make sure to press that subscribe button. It's absolutely free and you get tons of great content from us here at Premier Injuries. We're putting out loads of good stuff all week for you. We've got Dr. Raj, we've got mine and Ben analyses, and then we also do Q&As just for you to help you with your FPL teams. So for now, I'm going to say goodbye and a good luck.
And thanks again, Jay. Brilliant podcast. Hope you enjoyed it, guys. That looks like game 32. Attacking assets done. It's a wrap. Enjoy. Good luck.